Hello everyone and welcome to my Y&R Trends channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The air in the grand ballroom was thick with the scent of 1,000 white roses and the low, pleased hum of old money and new alliances. It was a day of polished perfection, a testament to the power of the Newman and Abbott dynasties, momentarily united not by corporate raiding or bitter litigation, but by the marriage of two of their scions. Christine Blair, once the fierce district attorney known as the Dragon, stood at the altar, her hand tucked securely in the arm of Danny Romalotti, the man who had been the great what-if of her life for decades. The years of separation, of different paths and other loves, had all melted away in this second chance, this late-in-life miracle that felt both fragile and unshakably right. Every detail was flawless, from the way the light caught the dewdrops on the floral arrangements to the genuine, tear-filled smiles of the guests, who had weathered the storms of Genoa City alongside them. It was a sanctuary of happiness, a bubble of pure, unadulterated joy, and for a few precious moments, it seemed that the relentless drama that defined their lives had finally been banished to the past. Christine, in her elegant, off-white gown, looked at Danny, his hair now silver but his eyes still holding the same boyish warmth, and she allowed herself to believe in the fairy tale. This was their time, a hard-won peace after a lifetime of battles, both in the courtroom and in the heart. Unseen by the enraptured congregation, a figure moved with a predatory stillness in the shadowed periphery of the ballroom. Phyllis Summers had not been on the guest list, for obvious and numerous reasons. Her presence was a splinter of chaos in this world of order, a walking, breathing embodiment of every grudge, every betrayal, every scorched earth policy that had ever been enacted in their tangled histories. She was a woman forged in the fires of her own impulses, a master of grand, destructive gestures, and as she watched Danny gaze at Christine with a love so profound it was almost painful to witness, something inside her finally snapped. The carefully constructed walls of reason, the feeble promises she had made to herself to let him be happy, crumbled into dust. This was not just a wedding. To Phyllis it was a theft. It was a public erasure of her own history with Danny, of the passionate, tumultuous love they had shared, of the son they had raised together. The sight of their happiness felt like a personal affront, a mockery of every feeling she had ever harbored for him. The quiet hum of the ceremony became a roaring in her ears, drowning out the minister's words, drowning out the soft music, until all that was left was the white-hot, blinding certainty that she could not, and would not, allow this to happen. This was not a calculated move, it was a raw, visceral reaction, the culmination of a lifetime of being told no, of being the other woman, the troublemaker, the one who was never quite good enough for a lasting, respectable happiness. The moment the minister asked if anyone present could show just cause why the two should not be lawfully joined, a silence fell, the kind of silence that is filled with unspoken goodwill and anticipation. It was a rhetorical question, a formality, the last hurdle before the final binding pronouncement. And into that pristine silence, Phyllis's voice cut like shattering glass. "I object." The two words were not shouted, but they were delivered with a force that sucked the air from the room. Every head turned in unison. Danny's face, once soft with emotion, went pale with a kind of horrified recognition. Christine's posture, always so composed, stiffened, her hand tightening on Danny's arm as if an earthquake had just struck. The Dragon, long retired from the legal battlefield, was instantly back on high alert, her eyes narrowing at the sight of her oldest, most relentless adversary. "You have no right to be here," Christine said, her voice low but carrying a blade of pure ice. But Phyllis was already advancing, her movements jerky, fueled by a toxic cocktail of heartbreak and rage. "No right," she laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "I have every right. You think you can just rewrite history, Christine? You think you can just wipe away everything that came before you? He was mine first. We have a son. We have a life that you can never ever understand." The confrontation escalated with a terrifying speed, a verbal wildfire that the stunned guests and even the security personnel at the back of the room could not immediately contain. Danny stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture, his voice a desperate plea. "Phyllis, don't do this. Please. Not here. Not like this." But his intervention only poured gasoline on the flames. To Phyllis, his defense of Christine of this perfect day was the ultimate betrayal. It was him choosing her, yet again finalizing it in front of God and everyone. The world narrowed to the three of them in the center of that opulent room. The specific venomous accusations that flew from Phyllis's lips were a brutal recap of their shared history. The affairs, the manipulations, the times she had been cast aside, the pain she had endured that she firmly believed gave her a moral authority to shatter this moment. She spoke of secrets and vulnerabilities, things only the three of them knew, weaponizing their intimate past for maximum public damage. Christine, for her part, stood her ground, parrying each accusation with legal precision and a cold fury, but she was fighting a ghost, a memory that had suddenly taken solid, screaming form in the middle of her wedding. And then, in a move that seemed to happen in slow motion, yet was over in a heartbeat, Phyllis's hand dipped into her purse. It was not a compact or a tissue she pulled out. The glint of cold, hard metal caught the light, a stark, anachronistic horror against the soft, romantic backdrop of the wedding. It was a small, pearl-handled revolver, an object of pure, undiluted threat. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom, followed by screams and the frantic scraping of chairs as people dove for cover. The scene descended from a dramatic confrontation into a full-blown crisis. Time seemed to warp, stretching and compressing. Danny's instincts took over. He moved not away from the danger, but directly into its path, placing his body as a shield in front of Christine. "Phyllis, for God's sake, put it down," he yelled, his voice cracking with a fear he had never known. "Think about Daniel. Think about what you're doing." Christine, from behind the protective barrier of her groom, did not cower. Her legal mind raced, assessing the threat, looking for a solution. "Phyllis, this isn't you," she said, her voice remarkably steady, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. "This is the pain talking. No one here wants to hurt you. Just lower the weapon. Let's talk." But their words, the pleas and the reason, were like trying to hold back a tidal wave with bare hands. Phyllis's eyes were wild, unfocused, seeing not the people in front of her but the phantoms of her own anguish. The gun in her hand felt like an extension of her rage, the only thing that gave her any power in a world that was systematically taking everything from her. She waved it erratically, not aiming at anyone specifically, but holding the entire room, the entire future hostage. "You took everything from me," she screamed, her voice raw. "You took my life. My family. You don't get to have this. I won't let you." The standoff felt eternal, a frozen tableau of terror. The wedding was now a crime scene in the making. The beautiful flowers and elegant table settings a grotesque setting for a potential tragedy. In that unbearable tension, the dynamic between the three shifted from a battle of past versus present to a desperate fight for survival. Danny, seeing the utter lack of recognition in Phyllis's eyes, understood that logic was lost. He changed his tactic, his voice dropping, becoming softer, more personal, reaching for the man she had once loved. Phyllis read. He used the old, intimate nickname. "Remember the Blackie's Boutique? Remember our song? We had something real. It was messy and complicated, but it was real. This isn't you. The woman I loved was passionate and fiery, but she wasn't a killer. She was a fighter, a survivor. Don't let this be your legacy. Don't let this be what Daniel remembers." His words seemed to pierce the haze for a fraction of a second. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. Christine, sensing the microscopic opening, pressed on, her tone shifting from adversarial to empathetic, a masterful performance born of genuine terror and a need to survive. "He's right, Phyllis. We've all made mistakes. God knows I have. I've been driven by revenge, too. I know what it feels like to have that fire burning inside you, telling you to destroy everything in your path. But it passes. The fire dies down and you're left with the ashes. Don't be left with this. Put the gun down and we can get you help. We can find a way through this. Together." The Pleas, a duet of reason and nostalgia, hung in the air. For a heart-stopping moment it seemed they might have worked. The arm holding the gun wavered, dipping slightly. A tear traced a path through Phyllis's meticulously applied makeup. She looked from Danny's pleading face to Christine's determined one, and for a second, the woman beneath the mania was visible, terrified and lost. But the moment was fragile, shattered by a sudden sharp movement from a well-meaning but foolish guest who lunged from the side, trying to tackle her. It was a miscalculation that would haunt them all. Phyllis jerked back, the surprise and panic overriding the brief moment of clarity. The gun, an object now entirely divorced from her conscious control, erupted. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, a single catastrophic blast that echoed off the high ceilings. It was not the sound of a Hollywood gunfight, but a brutal final punctuation to the chaos. There was no time to see where the bullet went, no time for anything but reaction. Danny, acting on pure instinct, shoved Christine backwards with all his strength, sending her stumbling behind the heavy wooden pulpit just as a second reflexive shot rang out. He felt a searing white-hot pain tear through his shoulder, the force of it spinning him around. He collapsed to the floor, a dark blooming stain instantly spreading across the pristine white of his tuxedo jacket. Christine's scream was not one of fear for herself, but of utter soul-crushing terror for him. Danny! The name was a wail, a prayer, a curse. In the immediate deafening silence that followed the gunshots, the world fractured into discrete, horrifying images. Phyllis stood frozen, the gun smoking in her hand, her eyes wide with the shock of what she had done. The reality of the situation, the sight of Danny bleeding on the floor, broke through the last of her rage, leaving only a hollow, chilling horror. She dropped the weapon as if it had burned her, the clatter on the marble floor unnaturally loud. The spell was broken. Security swarmed her, pinning her arms behind her back, but she offered no resistance. She was a shell, her gaze locked on the man she had once loved, now lying motionless. Guests were screaming, crying, some rushing forward to help, others fleeing for the exits. The perfect wedding had become a nightmare. Christine scrambled to Danny's side, her dress pooling around her in the blood that was now seeping onto the floor. She pressed her hands against the wound, applying pressure as she had seen in a dozen crime dramas, her legal mind useless in the face of this visceral physical crisis. "Stay with me, Danny. Look at me. Stay with me," she commanded, her voice trembling but fierce. His eyes were open, clouded with pain and confusion, but they found hers. He tried to speak, to form her name, but only a pained gasp escaped his lips. The paramedics, who had been on standby for any elderly guest-related emergencies, burst into the room with their kits and gurneys, their professional efficiency a stark contrast to the emotional wreckage around them. They took over from Christine, their movements quick and sure, assessing the damage, stabilizing him for transport. As they loaded Danny onto the stretcher, Christine clinging to his uninjured hand, she cast one last look back at the ballroom. It was a war zone. The elegant chairs were overturned, a vase of roses had been smashed, and in the center of it all, surrounded by security, stood Phyllis. Her face was a mask of numb shock, but as her eyes met Christine's, a silent, terrible communication passed between them. It was not just hatred, though that was there in abundance. It was an acknowledgement that their war, a conflict that had spanned decades, had just escalated into something from which there could be no return. This was no longer about stealing a man or winning an argument. This was about life and death. Christine turned away, her focus narrowing to the man fighting for his life, to the future that had been so violently ripped from their grasp. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens, fluorescent lights, and frantic prayers. In the sterile antiseptic chaos of the emergency room, as doctors worked on Danny behind swinging doors, Christine was left alone with the ringing in her ears and the phantom smell of gunpowder mixed with roses. Her wedding dress, stained with her husband's blood, felt like a grotesque costume. The joy of just an hour before was now a distant, foreign country. All that was left was the cold, hard reality of waiting, and the dawning furious understanding that Phyllis Summers had not just interrupted their wedding. She had detonated a bomb at the very center of their lives, and the pieces, sharp and deadly, would be falling for a very, very long time. The path forward was shrouded in uncertainty, paved with legal battles, traumatic recovery, and the profound challenge of finding a way back to the light from the deepest, darkest darkness Phyllis had ever cast. The day began in Genoa City with an unsettling calm that always seemed to precede chaos. The town had seen its share of scandals and heartbreaks, but today's wedding at the Abbott Mansion promised more than just romance and champagne toasts. Beneath the glimmering chandeliers and the sweet scent of white roses, tension was ready to detonate. Phyllis Summers had been quiet for too long, and everyone knew that when Phyllis went silent it wasn't peace, it was preparation. The morning air was thick with whispers as guests arrived, elegantly dressed, yet burdened by their own histories. Danny Romalotti and Christine Blair, still connected by old love and deeper regret, were among them. Their recent closeness had already set tongues wagging, especially because Phyllis, Danny's longtime obsession and occasional tormentor, had been spotted in town again, uninvited but clearly planning something. Rumor had it she'd been seen buying something from a shady contact on the edge of town. It wasn't flowers or champagne. Inside the mansion, the wedding decor shimmered in perfect contrast to the emotional minefield forming among the guests. Abby fussed with the floral arch while Tracy tried to keep the peace, sensing that the tension had nothing to do with the flowers. Across the room, Danny stood by Christine, his hand brushing hers unconsciously. The spark between them, undeniable, nostalgic, and dangerous, was not lost on the watching eyes of friends and foes alike. Phyllis, meanwhile, lingered just beyond the glass doors of the terrace, her fiery red hair catching the light like a warning flare. Her mind replayed every betrayal, every humiliation, every loss she blamed on them, on Danny for choosing Christine again, and on Christine for always being the woman who won. The wedding wasn't even about her, but in her fractured heart, it became the stage where she would reclaim control. She clutched the small handgun in her purse, a symbol of the darkness she'd allowed to consume her. For weeks she'd rationalized it. She didn't want to kill, only to make them listen, to make them feel. But anger and heartbreak never followed plans. As the ceremony began, Phyllis watched from the doorway, her breath shallow and her emotions surging like a tide. The music swelled and everyone turned as the bride entered, glowing and serene, unaware that her wedding would become the stuff of Genoa City nightmares. Danny shifted uncomfortably in his seat, catching a flicker of red hair at the back. Christine noticed his tension and followed his gaze, her eyes widening when she recognized the figure half hidden behind the curtain. She whispered sharply, "Danny, she's here." His pulse spiked. He had known Phyllis was unstable, but he'd convinced himself she wouldn't cross the line again. She already faked her own death once. Surely she wouldn't risk another catastrophe. But as her hand slipped into her bag, reality crashed into him. She would. He moved instinctively, murmuring to Christine to stay calm, but his voice betrayed panic. The officiant's words blurred as Danny rose from his seat, his eyes locked on Phyllis. Guests turned, curious, murmurs rippling through the crowd. The bride paused, confused. Phyllis stepped forward, her expression a storm of rage and heartbreak. "Congratulations," she said, her tone dripping venom. "Another perfect Genoa City fairy tale, right? Until someone ruins it." Her hand trembled as she pulled out the gun. Screams erupted. Chairs scraped. Christine froze for a moment before instinct pushed her forward. "Phyllis, stop," she shouted. "You don't want to do this." Phyllis's eyes darted between Christine and Danny, her voice cracking. "Don't tell me what I want. You took everything from me. Every time I try to start over, you're there. Smiling, perfect, loved." Danny moved closer, his hands up, pleading softly. "Phyllis, please listen to me. This isn't the way. Put the gun down." He remembered all the times he'd seen that same wild light in her eyes, the mix of pain and defiance that made her both dangerous and heartbreaking. "You don't understand," Phyllis whispered, her voice trembling as tears welled up. "You never did. You chose her again. After everything we went through, after everything I did for you." The crowd had scattered to the sides, leaving only Danny, Christine, and Phyllis in the center of the chaos. Someone had called 911. The sound of distant sirens underscored the unbearable tension. Christine stepped forward slowly, her hands raised in peace. "Phyllis, it doesn't have to end like this. You've been hurt, I know. But this will destroy you. It'll destroy your kids. Summer loves you. Daniel still wants to believe in you. Don't throw that away." The mention of her children cracked something inside Phyllis. Her lower lip trembled. For a fleeting second she looked lost, the rage melting into raw anguish. Then somewhere in the crowd a camera flashed. The sound jolted her back into fury, the humiliation of being watched, judged, exposed again. She raised the gun higher. Danny lunged instinctively, shouting her name. The shot rang out like thunder in a church. Glass shattered. Christine screamed. For a heartbeat everything stopped. Danny hit the floor beside Christine, grabbing her, checking her for blood. The bullet had missed them by inches, striking a vase instead, sending shards across the marble floor. Phyllis's breath came in ragged gasps, her body shaking uncontrollably. "I didn't mean," she stammered, tears streaming down her face. "I just wanted you to listen." The sirens grew louder. Christine reached for her again, voice breaking. "Phyllis, it's not too late. Please give me the gun." The desperation in Christine's tone wasn't fear, it was empathy. For all their wars, Christine never stopped seeing the woman beneath Phyllis's chaos, the one desperate for love and belonging. Phyllis hesitated, glancing down at her trembling hands. Danny, still on the floor, whispered, "Phyllis, look at me. I forgive you." The words hit her harder than any bullet could. For the first time, she looked at him and saw not anger but sorrow. Outside, police cars screeched to a halt. Officers rushed in, weapons drawn. Phyllis backed away, terrified. "No, I'm not going to jail again. I won't." Christine shook her head. "You don't have to run. Just end this peacefully." But Phyllis's mind was unraveling. Every failure, every heartbreak, every betrayal blurred into one unbearable weight. "You all think I'm the villain," she sobbed, voice echoing through the mansion. "Maybe I am. But at least I'm honest about it." She pointed the gun at herself for a split second, sending shock through everyone. Danny jumped up, desperate. "Phyllis, please. Don't do this." His voice cracked, filled with guilt and love and helplessness. "Think of Summer. Think of Daniel. They can't lose you again." Tears streamed down her cheeks as her arm began to tremble uncontrollably. The chaos around her dimmed, replaced by fragments of memory. Summer as a little girl laughing. Daniel forgiving her over coffee. Jack Abbott once telling her she was capable of anything if she just stopped fighting ghosts. Her hand lowered slowly. For the first time in years, Phyllis looked small, broken, human. She dropped the gun. The sound of metal clattering on marble echoed like an exhale. Officers swarmed in, taking her into custody as she sobbed uncontrollably. Christine and Danny stood together, shaken and pale. "You saved her," Danny whispered. Christine shook her head, her voice quiet. "No, Danny. I just reminded her who she really is."